branding in your business. My name is Amy Ballantyne, and I'm the host of Power to the People Pleasers. I'm so excited to have my guest, Maria Popova, here. She is the VP of Sales at Equity Media and a branding expert. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So let's dig right in. This podcast is for individuals who have people pleasing tendencies, and we're empowering all of us, myself included, to step into the light, to, you know, put ourselves first, all of those wonderful things that we aim to do every day. Has there ever been a time, Maria, where you were a people pleaser? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. So I think indeed what you mentioned, I totally agree with that. If you step on a path of an entrepreneur, self-employed professional, you inevitably come across situations where you feel like you may not be entirely aligned with your purpose in the beginning. So let me give you a bit of information about my background. So I was born and raised in the post-Soviet Russia, and I had lost one of my parents at a very young age. So my mother pretty much became the only parent for me, and you can imagine that a loss of a parent is a very, very strong event. So that caused me to become a people pleaser in a way that when you have this only parent, you want, like as a child, you put the blame on yourself, and you want to do everything you possibly can to just not let your only parent that you have left down. Yeah.
Mhm. Wow. Wow, that's big. So in your work, do you ever come across clients that are people pleasers, and how does that play out?
Yeah, definitely. So fast forward, actually didn't dream of becoming an entrepreneur, never thought of a career in advertising or marketing. I was kind of, how do you say that industry chose me, I always like to say.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's a very cutthroat environment where people pleasers generally don't do very well, and you kind of
Mm.
always learn it the hard way.
Yeah, so what would you give guidance for those people pleasers as entrepreneurs? I am one, so what's your guidance?
Yeah, so I think the first step would be to really understand that, and be okay with the fact that it's not possible for everyone to always like you. So you just have to let go of this idea that there will always be friction. In a way, there will always be people who just don't go well with your thoughts and ideas, which is fine, right? So that's what makes, I think, working and living in society also very interesting. Uh, so that would be number one. Number two is focus on the few people who are a good match and a good fit to work together with you,
Yeah.
right? And then really treat those people maybe in a more special way than you normally would.
Mm.
Because I think that it's important to really cherish those few individuals that really support you,
Mm.
instead of trying to please everybody.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. So we're here today. We want to learn about authentic branding. So you started as a freelance writer and turned into this brand developer. You also are involved in Toastmasters, which is super cool. I was involved in that many years ago. But I found this little slogan on your social media, let's pop your brand. And I think that's a play on your last name, is it?
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely.
So tell me, what is the starting point for authentic branding?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, regardless of what industry you're in, you have to realize that there is room to present yourself as a personality first. And if you think about the big known brands that we use on a daily basis, According to studies, about 4% of a brand's reputation is linked to the personality of the CEO.
Mm, wow.
So no matter how big or small your company is, 40% of that reputation is automatically linked to you as an individual. So
Wow.
how you present yourself is very, very important.
Mhm, mhm. So, okay, so that presentation of ourselves is important, and how does that translate to the branding online then?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think a lot of people, when they start marketing themselves, branding themselves online, first of all, they just try to blindly copy what other people do. They
Mm.
copy trends without really understanding them, which pretty much makes it look like a copycat. So you're just saying pretty much the same thing that people in your industry are saying. So when you
Mhm.
take a step back and instead of trying to copy what everybody else does, really nail down what you stand for as an individual and link that to your company's values and goals.
Mhm.
So, ideally, this is something that you should be really pitching even more than your services or products.
Hmm.
Your mission, vision, and those kind
Yes,
of things.
and values. And so when you say pitching these things, do you mean like this is the what you're creating your content around? Is that what you mean?
So let's kind of distinguish between the personal branding I do on my personal accounts and the corporate branding I do for my company,
Yes, please.
because those are two different things, right? So I did choose to focus more on personal branding, knowing all this research and also having all these amazing case studies of the people that we have worked, that this is a more streamlined way for you to get to where you want to, because most of the time people don't care about the logos, they don't care about the fancy facade of the company, but they do care about the people who run it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So that's number one. So what I do on my own accounts is I try to keep a kind of a healthy mix between personal information,
Mhm.
and also position myself as an expert.
Right.
And I think a lot of people again struggle with kind of finding that balance, because first
Yeah.
of all, there are rules, but at the same time social media is such a changing landscape. You can't just expect those rules to never change, because that's just
Mhm.
simply not how it works.
Yes.
So I think it's best to kind of really find the principles that you think are easy for you to apply to your already existing lifestyle, other than trying indeed being inauthentic and do something that's just not natural for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And can you share a little bit more about this idea of positioning yourself as an expert? Consider a person very new to their work. How would you help that person to have the authentic branding?
Yeah. So first of all, we would have a conversation about where you are right now, where do you want to go, and why do you think you didn't manage to get there yet? What was preventing you from getting there? Most of the time, people who reach out to us notice a bottleneck in their business. So with their current positioning, with the way they present themselves right now, they're just not able to grow as fast as they want.
Right.
So when we look at how they communicate their values, both internally and externally, there's most of the time, we do an audit, and then there is, certain incongruences that we find in that. So, for
Mhm.
example, it's like, this is what you say you are, but you're doing the opposite. And that
Mm,
confuses people who find you online and who engage with your brand.
yeah, yeah. So don't be confusing. That's a good and Okay, so you're doing this work to help them clarify their values, their purpose, their mission, to be authentic with their own style, their own voice, not copycatting. What's the next layer of authentic branding in your opinion?
Mhm. So I think it's very close to coaching and to what you do in a way, right? It takes many conversations. Really, it's not like you can have a half an hour conversation and this is completely nailed down.
Right.
Those things take a few months, if not years. Um, and so every campaign that we do for our clients, right? So first comes the strategy, then the implementation, and
Mhm.
every time it gets refined, right? So let's say every social media campaign that we do on a pretty much weekly basis, we do all the tracking and the audits, and we see what works well and what doesn't. And then in the next campaign, we would take those results and apply them, and it's like, yeah, it's very tedious process of refining. um yeah, that's it, I guess.
You know what? I love though what you said. I was going to come back to the word refining, so I'm glad you mentioned it twice. Because so often we're looking from the outside in on entrepreneurs who have all of the success that many of us desire, right? But we don't see the many iterations that they've gone through. We only see where they're at right now, right? And so that's a good reminder that change is part of this. And revisiting and reworking is all part of getting more and more and more clear on your branding, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So, are you able to share when you are working with a client, you said you do different social media campaigns. What is what's a campaign that stands out from your experience where the client really nailed their authentic branding, like they were on brand? Can you share a story about that?
Yeah, definitely. So, social media is just one of the examples, right? Most of the time, this is like a starting point,
Mhm.
but then we pretty much expand to all other media.
Okay.
uh, because again, social media is only one way of branding yourself. But then there is, traditional media. There's newspapers, magazines, PR, podcasting, whatnot.
Mhm.
So it gets much easier once you have nailed down that core, the core values and everything else. And think about it that way. It's like a story that you recycle multiple
Mhm.
times, but then every time you add new details to it. So, of course,
Right.
on social media, that would be like a short form of the story.
Mhm.
And every time you can add different details to it. Let's say everybody has an origin story, right? How did
Mhm.
you choose a certain path? How did you decide to become a professional in a certain field?
Yeah.
But every time you tell this story, you may kind of reveal new aspects of that. Oh, there was also on the way I met this and this person who helped
Mhm.
me. So yeah, it's linked to storytelling inevitably. And then of course, when it comes to media, there is long format. So in the long format, in the long conversation, you can disclose so much more. And yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, so that's interesting. It's funny when I think about branding, my immediate thought goes to social media, but I love that you brought up, podcasting as a part of your strategy, newspapers, magazines. There are so many aspects of branding and where we can put our information out into the world to share the vision of what we're hoping to achieve, right? So, um, I love it. I love it. Is there anything else when you're thinking about branding, this idea of popping your brand that you do that is unique to help those individuals?
Yeah, so let me present it that way. So we at Equity Media treat branding as a business tool. And unfortunately, very often people really forget about its real purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's to help develop your brand further, it's to help develop your business, right? So, branding by itself is not as valuable. But when it's applied to your unique skill set, that really helps you stand out, and it helps you to remove yourself from the competition and from the commoditization. Because this is a real problem, right? There is only one way to compete for the lowest price, and it's not a sustainable strategy for anybody. But if you want to stand out, you need to carve a niche for yourself. And it just happens that branding is the only existing known way of doing it.
Mm. Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and I would say that the unique thing that we do is we really educate people on it first before we, prescribe anything.
Right. Right. Amazing. So we've had a great conversation here today. I've taken away a lot of nuggets for how I'm going to look at my branding differently. How would you sum this and wrap this podcast up for our listeners?
Yeah, so I think by mentioning our mission and vision as well. So at Equity Media, what we're striving for is to actually bring integrity back into the media. So that's really the big goal, and everything we do is really focusing on that. And we really want to see more businesses succeed. That's why we do what we do, and that's why we share our knowledge. So we want all entrepreneurs, to stop being pleasers, but focus on pleasing themselves first in a way that, carving a niche for themselves, creating their dream lifestyle, and doing work that they find the most fulfilling.
Amazing. Amazing. Always great to have you on the podcast here today, Maria. It was so informative and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. It was a
All
pleasure.
right. Wonderful. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Power to the People Pleaser. Stay tuned for the next one, and we hope to see you then. Have a great day.